This episode of Settle the Score is sponsored by Sky Sports. Stream Sky Sports flexibly on Now. What you want, when you want, no fuss. Go to nowtv.com to start streaming Sky Sports today. Yes, welcome to Settle the Score. My name is Harry Durham. Arsenal came from behind to beat Newcastle 2-1 at St James's Park. I'm pleased to say that joining me this morning is Lee Lawler from Newcastle Fans TV and Harry Symeou from Chronicles of a Gooner. Right, lads, loads and loads and loads to get through. Harry Symeou, we'll start with you then. Do you think last night Arsenal showed some real guts in the Premier League title race?
Yeah, for sure. I think, you could have looked at yesterday's game in one of two ways. You could have said Liverpool have dropped points on the Saturday, which means actually the pressure's off. And if we get a draw at St James's Park, a place where we've been quite poor in recent times, that'll be fine. But no, Arsenal wanted to win it. And you could see the difference in the attitude, in the mentality when they pulled a goal back and drew level with Newcastle. There was a short celebration, but it was all hands on deck, get back to the centre circle and let's go again. And you really got the feeling that Arsenal desperately wanted it. And I think Gary Neville said in his commentary, championship winning sides, they go and win this game. And Arsenal did exactly that. So, there won't be any of that handbrake talk this week. There won't be any of the discussion around the way the managers sort of set the team up and then managed it in game. He got everything absolutely spot on. The players showed that they had the cojones to sort of push right to the end. And in the end, they got what they deserved, in my opinion.
Lee, what do you make of that got what they deserved? Do you think that Newcastle were too flat in the attack and Newcastle probably should have taken a point? I mean, we were speaking earlier. Some of Nick Pope's decision-making and kicking was absolutely shambolic.
Life of a goalkeeper, though, isn't it? Nick Pope was absolutely having a worldie up until the last few dying minutes, and he was having the game of his life. And to be fair to Nick Pope, he has started the season off really well. Just life of a goalkeeper, the kicking, just the lead up to the corner kick, and then the corner comes in. He's got to come out and claim that, punch it away. He doesn't, and it goes against him. And I was surprised how we set up, to be honest, considering our record in recent times against Arsenal at St James's Park has been absolutely class. And we were very defensive, and I questioned this on our podcast, and we were like, why are we finishing fifth in the Premier League? We've gone in the Champions League, and we're playing defensive football against Arsenal. Yes, you can respect the opposition, but everybody hates coming to St James's Park, playing against us in the atmosphere. I was really surprised by it, and I didn't like it.
I think in fairness, a lot of teams have done that against Arsenal this season. You've seen Liverpool do it, even at Anfield. You've seen Manchester City do it. There have been games where the two sides have essentially cancelled each other out. I do find all the Nick Pope stuff really strange. I read an article last night that said something like 90 seconds of madness and Nick Pope costs Newcastle the game. If it wasn't for Nick Pope, the game would have been done after 25 minutes because he was in inspired form. So I don't really understand the sort of jumping on Nick Pope's back. I know you're not doing that, mate, but it does feel like online there's a lot of that and it just doesn't make any sense to me.
I think, Harry, what people are waiting for is for Ramsdale to come in. Obviously, you'll know better more than anyone else because he's better with his feet. In modern day football, that's how all managers want to play. They want to play out from the back. Nick Pope isn't great with his feet, but as you say, he was having an absolute worldie up until that last few minutes where, unfortunately, he's let a goal go in. But he was, like I say, he kept the score down, so he was having a worldie.
I want to talk to you lads about VAR as well and your feelings on it. Harry, obviously the Gyökeres decision when it looked like that Nick Pope brought him down. I think it did bring him down, obviously, and I think it should have been a penalty. And Lee, also the Anthony Elanga decision with Gabriel's arm up in the air. And I know, obviously, everyone's talking about it taking a deflection from the challenge, which would mean if it hits the arm, it isn't a penalty. Harry Symeou, I'll start with you first. Was it a bit of a VAR disaster class at St James's Park?
Yeah, I just don't think we know the laws of the game anymore. We don't understand what the hell is going on. I remember last season, Howard Webb sitting there and saying that just because somebody gets a touch on a ball, it doesn't mean that they haven't committed a foul. And I remember that being wheeled out after Arsenal conceded a penalty at Brighton when William Saliba got his head to the ball, but was apparently adjudged to have committed a foul anyway. Right? So I just want to see some consistency. Gyökeres has beaten Pope. He's going around Pope. Pope makes contact with the ball because Gyökeres has kicked it against him, not because his challenge is any good. Okay, that's the bottom line. And listen, if you don't want to give that, fine, but then you can't give the penalty at the other end. And I think that's what kicked in there. If you're saying that Nick Pope's deflection on the ball, because it's not him playing the ball, it's a deflection of the ball, it negates the fact that it's a penalty kick. Then at the other end, you have to look at the deflection off of Gabriel and say, well, that in that instance negates a penalty kick at that end. So like they had to apply that level of consistency in the game, because ultimately for me, they got the first one wrong. Really and truly, they should both be penalties as far as I'm concerned. But in the end, that's not what happened. And I felt like the officials were scrambling to try and find a reason maybe to rule out the Gabriel handball, because they know what they did earlier in the game. And actually, if they applied that same logic, that was the only decision they could come to.
Lee, your thoughts on that?
Nah, it's not a penalty. The Gyökeres one, he leaves his foot in and he's waiting for Pope to clatter him. I was in the Gallagher. I'm only 10 rows up and I've seen it perfectly. I don't need a replay to say that. So when Gyökeres goes through and Nick Pope does get a flick on the ball, for me, that's the right decision. It took a long time in the stadium. We were like, why is it taking so long? It must have been really, really close. But he came back and obviously didn't give it. The other one, initially in the Gallagher, it clearly hits his hand. So we're all screaming for a penalty, but obviously we don't have the benefit of a replay. And I was speaking to you, Harry, last night, but I haven't had the chance to check VAR, but haven't seen it now back. It's a slight deflection that hits his hand. Yes, his hand's in an unnatural position because it's behind his head, but because it's hit another part of his body, that's not a penalty. However, I do agree with Harry with the consistency, because only 2 years ago in the Champions League, same thing happened with Tino Livramento in PSG away from home. And that was given as a penalty when it hit his knee, then his hand, and Mbappe stepped up and got the equaliser. So there has to be consistency with the rules. I mean, we don't even know what they are nowadays. It's ridiculous.
Exactly that. That's the point. We don't know what the rules are. And I agree with you on the Livramento one. That was not a penalty in a million years. And the other problem that we have is not only do we have inconsistency within our own league, within our group of officials, we've got it between what's given in the Premier League and what's given in Europe as well. So everybody's a bit confused. Everybody's a bit baffled. It feels like, in situations like that where it takes an age to come to a decision, someone's flicking through a law book and trying to find some reason to justify their initial instinct. But I will say there does appear to be a slightly different law book when we go up to Newcastle, because you can push people in the back with two hands, you can smash into people, and that's absolutely fine. But anywhere else, those things are pulled up as fouls. Joe Linton, for me, I mean, I don't know how he gets away with it week after week. He should have been booked after a minute. He wasn't. The rest of the game goes on. He commits foul after foul. He finally picks up a yellow card on 80 odd minutes. And what does he do? He does exactly what we're told that referees won't tolerate. He sarcastically applauds the referee for booking him, and he's allowed to just walk off scot-free. Now, again, I'm not petty, right? I'm not pedantic. I don't want to see him sent off. But again, where is the consistency? Because we had a couple of players sent off last season for flicking the ball to their right 3 or 4 yards. So that's my frustration. It's not with Newcastle. It's not with any other team. It's with the PGMOL, who just haven't got a lid on our sport anymore. They haven't got a clue what they're doing. They're making it up as they go along. And it's spoiling games week in, week out.
However, Harry, you're forgetting to mention that Valdemara got smashed in the face by Gabriel.
Correct, he did.
And to be fair to Valdemara, he come out and said, that's not the type of player I am, because most foreign players would be rolling around the floor, trying to con the officials that, he's been smashed. And it wasn't like a punch in the face. It was more like his hand grazed him. But, modern day football, they'll be rolling around 10 times trying to get a red card. And fair play to Valdemara for standing up. But Gabriel loves to play the pantomime villain, doesn't he?
But then we can also talk about Lascelles' hand in Gyökeres' face. He nearly gauged his eyes out. The point is, it happens at both sides. I'm not having a go at Newcastle. I'm not. I'm really not. I just think we've got to a stage where sort of, it's all tribalism. And what that's done, unfortunately, as much as we all love being tribal and supporting and backing our teams, and we're all going to look at every little decision with so much detail, the problem is that the absolute really poor officiating, it just goes under the radar all the time, because we're going to sit here and argue about this one and that one, and ultimately we're providing a cloak for the officials to hide behind and get away with it, because 50% of people will say that's the right call, 50% on the other side will say it's not, and ultimately we're just never going to get a good level of officiating. And that was the big, Arsenal were brilliant yesterday, but I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't talk about it just because we won. We got to talk about the level of officiating. It's all over the place.
I do think at the same time, obviously, you mentioned Gabriel there. I do think he was pretty pathetic yesterday, obviously. Almost shouting at Voltemade, forcing a handshake, when it was like, if you look at the header that Voltemade scored, I mean, Gabriel looking for a free kick to go the other way.
Can I say something on that, Harry?
No, but the thing is, he's put himself to the floor, and it was such a light push. And obviously, Harry, I've got my receipts with me, and I just found this tweet so funny from you last night. How many times have I got to tell people 2 hands in the back at St James's Park isn't and never will be a foul? Is there a conspiracy against Arsenal at St James's Park? What I know it goes back years. Obviously, if you think about the ball that went out of play, is it now starting to, you know, I can't get it, to be honest with you. I just think a lot of yesterday, especially Gabriel, he's meant to be this hard man, very soft.
There's no conspiracy. There's just referees being intimidated at a very atmospheric ground, which happens, right? It's not exclusive to Newcastle. It happens at lots of grounds up and down the country, all over the continent. My point with the 2 hands on the back was not, by the way, in reference to Voltemada on Gabriel for the goal. That was a perfectly legitimate goal. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But if you remember the last time we had a goal, or Newcastle got a goal that was illegitimate, in my opinion. There was 2 hands in the back of Gabriel from Joe Linton. Leandro Trossard was pushed with 2 hands in the back inside the box yesterday as well. Gabriel, in that instance, right, when Voltemada scores, do you know what I think he's done? He has realised that he's lost the flight of the ball. He knows that he is not getting there. He knows that it's going over the top of his head. So as soon as he feels a bit of contact, he thinks, I'm going to just roll the dice here and see if I can get something. That's the kind of S-house that Gabriel is. And I ain't got a problem with him trying it. The question should be whether we defended the situation right in the first place. Legitimate goal, nothing wrong with it. That was not what I was referring to. So your receipts, they don't have the item number on them, mate. They're not good enough.
I'm still not looking for a refund anyway, because Lee, I want to know what you think off the back of what Harry just said there, obviously, with the hostile atmosphere at St James's Park. Does that get in sort of referees' heads at the same time?
It shouldn't, but it might do. I mean, you can wind up certain players who are on the opposition. Gabriel was obviously one that we targeted, and look, he's got to be a lot more stronger there because he's went down like a fairy, to be honest with you. I think Valdemara's just got the better leap, as Harry said, and Valdemara's got off to a good start in his Newcastle career. But in terms of referencing atmospheres, Newcastle have one of the best, if not the best. Everyone loves coming to St James's Park, and do referees get under it? Look, we'll scream and shout like Bruno does. He gets a crowd going. He'll scream for corners, throws, wild tackles. It's what we get up for. And do referees get under the skin? Potentially, but it's hard to say that, isn't it?
Do you think that Arsenal fans think they're hard done by or not? Do they moan a little bit too much, like Mr. Simeo? Only joking, Harry.
What in general?
Oh yeah, it just feels like there's a bit of sort of like a refereeing. I understand obviously the frustrations, but it just seems like every single week there's a refereeing conspiracy, calling referees Liverpool supporters and stuff like that.
There's always like a conspiracy of Arsenal fans. Arsenal fans are terrible online. I'll get a lot of stick for saying that, but they are. Let's be honest, they're always twisting about something.
What I will say is that if you go back through last season in particular, Arsenal fans had plenty of reason to be frustrated because it feels like we're always the first, right? We were the first team to have a player sent off for flicking the ball 3 yards to his right. Then it happened a few weeks later against Manchester City, which was ridiculous. I saw countless examples of that happen over the season, some even at Emirates Stadium, where it didn't happen. Okay, the referee was not interested. Then you look at yesterday, and of all the decisions, this was the thing that wound me up the most, right? Ricardo Calafiori goes to take a throw in on the far side, right? He goes and grabs the towel to clean the ball. Now, I'm told, and I haven't checked this out, but I'm told that there is a law that says, that you're not supposed to use a towel to clean the ball. Fine, if that's the case, cool. But we see it happen week in, week out. In the winning goal that Liverpool scored the day before, they literally used the towel. Crystal Palace scored against Liverpool, I beg your pardon. They literally used the towel to dry the ball before they launched it in the penalty box. And guess what? Nobody said a word about it. Nobody brought it up, and it wasn't an issue. Why was it an issue? To the point where Jared Gillett, by the way, who apparently isn't allowed to do Liverpool games, I don't even know if that's true, he comes running over to snatch the towel off of Calafiori. How pedantic and petty can you be? Just point at him and say, mate, put it down. You're not allowed to use it. He's got to run over and make this big thing. It's just ridiculous. That's why Arsenal fans feel hard done by. I'm not saying that Newcastle get the rub of the green all the time. I certainly don't think that's the case. There are other clubs I'd put well above Newcastle that get decisions in this division more than most. And we won't mention any names. But it does feel frustrating because we're always being picked on. And that's based on evidence, not just based on some online sort of conspiracy theory that's floating around.
Harry, that isn't just any towel. That is Nick Pope's towel.
And Nick Pope had no problem with it. Did Nick Pope even pipe up about it? He didn't even say anything. He doesn't care.
What if you just went and scored from that throw-in? Imagine that goes in and it's Nick Pope's towel.
Would it have been because of the towel that we scored, or would it have been because Newcastle
Yeah,
failed
because
to
of the
defend?
towel. Blame the towel. Yeah, they got a massive assist.
Unbelievable, unbelievable.
This episode of Settle the Score is sponsored by Sky Sports. Stream Sky Sports flexibly on Now. What you want, when you want, no fuss. Go to nowtv.com to start streaming Sky Sports today.